Welcome to Zain Live, where everything is discussed and nothing is censored. Today, we have with us a Christian philosopher and thinker, Kenneth Samples, who's also part of the American organization which works upon reason and religion, reasons to believe. We have with us today Kenneth Samples. Welcome to our show, Kenneth Samples. This is Zain Khan. It's such a pleasure having you on our show.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Sir, I've always believed in the concept that if we were to understand God, we need to understand the devil, because to understand good, we must understand evil. Now, me being a Muslim, I've studied in depth about Satan in the Islamic theology. I was really interested to know about the devil, Satan, in the Bible, in Christian theology. So that's why we've invited you on our show, and I'd like to ask you questions on the topic of the history of Satan in Christianity. Let's get to the first question. What are the origins of Satan, his real name, and how did he come into being?
Yes, if you look to what we Christians call the Old Testament, particularly writings in the book of Ezekiel and the book of Isaiah, there is a description that biblical scholars think is the origin of Satan. The basic picture is that he is called Lucifer as a created angel. The name implies light bearer. It appears as if he held a very prestigious position in the angelic realm. Of course, what happens from that context is that he engages in rebellion with God and is cast down. And so the name Satan means adversary. And so he is perceived as being an adversary to God.
Mr. Samples, how did the devil or Satan or Lucifer defy God in the Christian theology?
Yeah, there isn't a great deal of explicit clarity about the question, but St. Augustine, who was one of the early Christian church fathers, he proposed the idea that there wasn't anything exterior to Lucifer to tempt him. And Augustine makes the case that what Lucifer did was he chose himself over God. So he didn't choose a bad thing, he chose a good thing, which was himself. But by placing himself above God, he engaged in idolatry. And so not all Christians would necessarily see it exactly that way, but that's a very influential thinking within historic Christian thinking.
Satan came in the guise of the serpent, if you read Genesis of the Bible. What other manifestations of the devil exist in the Bible, and is he a shapeshifter?
Well, you're exactly right. We see in the early chapters of Genesis, he appears as a serpent. Now, again, biblical scholars look at that, and it could be that he appeared as some type of animal, but it could also be that serpent means that he's clever. We see other places where Satan is involved. In particular, we see in the life of Christ, we see him tempting Judas, who is the apostle who betrays Christ. And in the New Testament, there is very clear statement that there is a demonic hand behind the world. Scripture talks about the whole world is in the lap of the evil one. And so we see it both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament.
Now, I want to get to a very philosophical question. What is the nature of the devil in Christianity?
Yeah, the general picture is that he is an angelic being. And so within Christianity, these would be highly intelligent creatures, but they are not physical. They don't have a body. So they would be spiritual creatures. And again, it would appear that Lucifer, was created to be some type of leader within the angelic realm. But his very nature would be angelic, which would be spiritual without a physical body.
Now, if we watch Hollywood movies, we see that Satan has a huge army of demons. What does theology say about that, Christian theology? Does Satan have a certain army, followers?
Yeah, again, I think looking at particularly the Old Testament, Christian theologians have generally drawn the conclusion that in that rebellion that Lucifer led, that a third of the angels followed him in rebellion to God. So we don't have any kind of specificity as to the number of angels that God has created, but Christian theologians have drawn that a third followed Lucifer in that rebellion against the Lord.
What sort of powers or superpowers does Satan have according to the Bible? Or is he just like any other human being or any other angel?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's very clear that angelic beings are beings of great power. They are not in God's classes that God created Lucifer like he did all angels. So if God were to withdraw his providential hand, so to speak, angels would not exist. So I think there are times where people exaggerate the power of angels and Lucifer, but I think it's also true that people underestimate them. I think when you look in the New Testament, you see maybe Satan's greatest power is his ability to deceive people. And so when I read the New Testament, I see that false ideas are often what is behind a satanic attack.
Now let's get to my favorite question, Satanism. Were there worshippers of Satan in the time of previous prophets before Jesus, according to the Bible, or is theistic Satanism a modern day phenomenon?
Yeah, very good question. I think it's fair to say that there have always been people that dabbled into what we would call maybe occultism, spiritism, looking for creatures that lie behind the physical realm. So it's difficult to know exactly what some of these ancient occult ideas were. But in terms of the modern idea of Satanism, most modern Satanists have they kind of worship nature. Uh, it isn't so much that they exalt the devil as it is that they have kind of a pagan worship of the natural world. So I'm not sure that modern day Satanists equate with maybe ancient people who dabbled into the occult.
But could you mention places in the Bible where it's where a cult is mentioned, so our viewers can check it out and see how in those times these things were practiced? Maybe the Bible can give us some information about that.
Yes, if you think of the Old Testament, and of course the Old Testament is made up of the law, the prophets, and the writings. If we go back to the law of Moses, the first 5 books, particularly in the book of Exodus, there is a condemnation of various spiritualistic practices that God forbids. It's found in numerous chapters there, in particular in Deuteronomy. And there is also a general statement in the New Testament that Christians are not to engage in kind of the paranormal kind of experiences.
How does the Bible see the Canaanites and their worship of the Baal? Could you explain that a little bit, and then we can get to our next question?
Yes. Well, if you look to the Old Testament, one of the most controversial aspects, I think, of the Old Testament, particularly to people today, is the religion of the Canaanites. What historians and archaeologists have been able to discover is that this Canaanite civilization engaged in various practices. They believed, for example, in temple prostitution. They engaged in the sacrifice of children. This was a pagan religion. It was condemned by the prophets of God in the Old Testament. Ultimately, Joshua, who was the right-hand man of Moses, if you will, Joshua led a conquest against the Canaanite religion. It appears that this was a deeply wicked and fallen civilization. And again, they didn't worship the monotheistic God of Yahweh. They engaged in all kinds of spiritual and what we today would see as largely criminal activities.
What is the relationship between demonic possession, exorcism, and Satan?
Yeah, it's a very interesting particular field. Demonic possession, of course, goes beyond in the idea of Satan kind of influencing the world or deceiving the world. This would be those, I think, rather rare cases where people actually become possessed with a demon. Again, I think if we look at the Old Testament, the Jews, and in the New Testament, Christians were told to stay away from these particular practices. There have been Christian ministers, priests, who have talked about encountering people who seem to have had a demonic presence take over their life. Exorcism is practiced within various Christian traditions, Catholic, Protestant, I believe, as well as Orthodox. And this would be the ritual of, by God's help and by God's Spirit, of rebuking the demon and ridding the demon from that particular person's life. Again, missionaries have talked about this when they've gone into pagan lands, have encountered seemingly people that seem to be possessed. What complicates it, however, is that in our modern world, we tend to look at behavior like that as maybe being mental illness. But nevertheless, there are some people that have been seemingly encountered demons that have enslaved people.
Me being a journalist and a filmmaker, I have experienced exorcism by Christian priests in an individual who was possessed, and also Muslim scholars, Islamic scholars who knew the certain knowledge, the spiritual knowledge. And it's so funny that if you look at Jewish scholars, Christian scholars, Muslim scholars, they all know how to deal with such demonic entities, and all three of them, it actually works when they actually have a genuine case. Otherwise, we can also look at the medical history and the psychological history of the patient. But when when a genuine case comes, you see that all these three individuals, they know how to deal with the situation. Is the devil dead, or is he still alive? Is it some sort of a debate in Christian theology? Because it is in Islamic theology. if the devil is dead or not?
I think within Christian theology, there is still the belief that the devil is in rebellion at this very time, and that his end, that is his judgment by God, will be awaited in the future. So just as there will be a great judgment for all humanity, that's affirmed in Christianity, as well as Judaism and Islam, but there will also be a time in which Satan will be cast into hell. So I would say that would be an eschatological, that would be a future event.
I agree.
Which would mean he would be alive and well, so to speak, now.
I agree. And predominantly the Muslim school of thought and Muslim theology also agrees that the devil is still alive and he will be cast into hell. But I was just interested if there was some sort of a philosophical debate inside Christianity. Last question. Is evil and Satan one of the same things, or are they different?
Yeah, that's a very, very provocative question. Just as there was a rebellion in the angelic realm, the Old Testament talks about the fallenness of Adam. So Adam eats the forbidden fruit, and humanity experiences a fallen condition. So I would say that it's I think very likely that Satan influences people to commit evil, and yet within Christianity, given our belief in original sin and the fall, we believe that human beings commit evil themselves, even apart from a spiritualistic kind of influence. So I would say evil comes not just out of the angelic realm, it also flows from the disobedience of human beings.
Thank you so much, Kenneth Samples, for being on our show. It was a pleasure having you, sir.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you.
This was Kenneth Samples, a Christian philosopher and thinker. We were discussing the topic of the history and the nature of Satan. Until the next episode of Zain Khan Live, keep on watching Zain Khan Live. This is Zain Khan. Take care and goodbye.